Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about throwing away code. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, would you say that software engineers should be prepared to throw away things that have been done previously in order to rewrite things in a different way? Yes. Well, I would say that uh, this is probably one of the. It's actually funny that this question comes along because I had this conversation with my team yesterday, actually, because I'm a little bit sad in a sense as well because we did talk about it because I'm very mindful. I try to be mindful of this sort of stuff. So I'll give you the story. One of the guys who works as a software developer in my team, in this specific team, I am the tech lead. He had a story that he had been working on, and since I can't always, unfortunately, I have a lot of meetings these days and a lot of other stuff that I have to do apart from the coding, because I have my stories in the code base, and I have these meetings. I hadn't been able to look at his code review as early as I'd like to. So he had basically put it up for code review, and he had sort of half communicated to the product owner that, yeah, this is pretty much done now. We should just be able to fix it and so forth and so forth. And usually when you say that to a product owner, they take that as a receipt for, yeah, it's done deal, it's going to be done now. And then I do the code review. And I've noticed that the fixes that he has applied is to a very old, in this case he was doing an update to a front-end React component in this case. And I look at the code and I notice that this is a component that has no unit tests. It actually has a fair bit of logic inside of it. And especially it's dealing with time values and good stuff like that, which time is always a very difficult thing to get right. And so I give him a comment saying that, it would be really great if you added some unit tests to this. And his reply is, yeah, but if I were going to write unit tests for this code, then I would probably have to refactor this component so that it's more testable, because it's very hard to test it. And I go, yeah, that's what I would do as well. What's your point? Well, I just sort of yeah, I can do that. And then the stand-up comes along, and he basically has to say to the product owner, well, yeah, it turns out that I had some more work to do on this thing. I mean, he's not the world's strongest communicator sometimes, because it makes it sound like he was incompetent, and the product owner goes, okay, all right, okay, yeah, sure, it takes longer. Okay, but when do you think it's done? Because this is a feature that the product owner really wants out, so he can brag about it, because that's his priority, of course. And then I say, well, that's actually my bad, I say to the product manager or the product owner. Because I've noticed that the code that we updated is actually legacy code from before I took over the project. And as we know, we've committed to raising our unit test coverage within the code base, because we have a lot of quality issues related to unit test coverage and quality of software. And since Hugh is working on this feature, he's touching a component that is sort of, it's basically scrap at this point. It's not really a sustainable solution. We're going to have to redo some of the work that the previous person who wrote this, who didn't take the time to actually test this and write it in a sustainable way. We're going to have to fix that. And the product owner understood. And then we talked, and I explained to him that you remember that comment I gave to you where I said that the quicker you can understand that code is not immutable, the faster we're going to solve this code coverage problem. And he said to me something that I think is very useful for most people to hear, and that is that, yeah, when I saw your comment, it made sense to me, because you don't want to change code that you didn't write sometimes. And I went, yeah, I know. Because you think your perception is that someone else wrote this code, and your instinct is don't change that code, because one part you don't feel like it's your code, one part is that you're scared to change it, because if you change it then it could break. This is why you write unit tests in the first place, guys, because if people are afraid to change the code, it just leads to the thing that kills everything, and that is shim programming, which is what my coworker did. He shimmed programmed. He looked at the thing and saw this is not good, but I know how to add my feature without touching anything else. And so I'm not going to fix the problem, I'm just going to add to the weight and add to the problem, so that the person who has to fix it has to do even more work to fix it. And this is where I tell people, this is how you get what I call critical mass of a system. When you shim things in continuously without ever actually fixing the underlying problem, the problem grows to a point where now you basically have to throw away the entire system. And so it is very important, I think, for people to sort of learn from this story of mine and realize that code is not immutable. And if you treat it as immutable, you have already created a situation where this code is actually, you're afraid to change the code. You can't fix it. And you can't fix it because, why? Because it can't be changed? No, you can change it. It's just text in a file. You can rewrite this. I promise you can. It's just that you're afraid to do it. You're too lazy to do it. You don't have time. There are all these excuses. The same thing as being really, really overweight. You are not beyond losing weight. You can lose weight, but you are unwilling to make the investment that is necessary to fix that problem. That is bottom line. It's the same thing with smoking, same thing with anything. There are no excuses for not being, not rewriting code or not doing it. The only possible reason you can have is that you fear the impact of what that decision is going to be all about. And that is something that is the #1 killer of every single code base I've ever touched. And it's the main reason why I argue to software companies. If any of your software companies are listening, if you don't hire competent tech leads and senior software developers, or people who actually understand this sort of problem in your teams, your code base and the future of your system is already in jeopardy. I guarantee it. Every single time. Because this is something that you cannot, as a manager, fix. You cannot see this behavior in the software developers that you work with. And honestly, among the people that I have worked with who are tech leads, or the sort of people who can actually spot these sorts of issues and actually address them effectively, I count them on one hand. And this is why we have shitty code. So what I want you to take away from this is that yes, in theory, or it should be, every single software developer should always be willing to, should be prepared to throw away something and rewrite it. Because the reality is, guys, it's the same thing with CSS. It's my favorite example for legacy. If someone has, due to poor judgment, lack of experience, whatever, for whatever reason, created a situation where the next decision that you're now going to make is not going to be a very good one, unless you undo what they have done, you are in a bit of a pickle. And this is why you have to address these problems as quickly as you spot them. Because if you don't, if it continues growing, the cost of undoing the decision grows ever more complicated. And you cannot fix, usually, an entire system of legacy code that has reached, as I call it, critical mass, where the cost of redoing it is so high that you're never going to get a capacity to do it, where you're measuring the refactor in days, not days, you're measuring it in weeks, maybe months. It is very difficult for you to make that sort of change happen and fix it. And that is why it's so important that you all start to understand that the second you start thinking about that code that isn't so nice, that you for some reason can't add unit tests to or something like that, as an excuse for you to do shim programming, you need to stop doing that. that behavior is the thing that causes the complete like the legacy and like all these issues that we have in IT. It's the entire process. It's the how it gets to that point, because you can't stop the fact that sometimes, guys, the code that is there doesn't make sense anymore. So fix it, rewrite it so that it makes sense for the things that we are gonna do here and now. It's not immutable. It's not just constant in the universe. It's just text in a file. So change it. Have a great day.